Historical events. Versailles Peace Treaty, which U.S. later refuses to ratify. Civil War in Russia since 1918. The Communist Third International, Comintern, is founded in Moscow to promote world communist revolution. Red Scare in U.S. Lenin launches State Commission for the Electrification of Russia. League of Nations formed. Following an isolationist foreign policy, U.S. declines to join. 18th Amendment. Prohibition effected in U.S. to 1933. Harding elected U.S. President. Post-war slump in U.S. to 1921. American women given the vote. First commercial radio broadcast in U.S. The Jazz Age. Date, 1920. Author's life. In January, Isaac Judah Asimov is born to parents Judah and Anna Rachel Asimov, Russian Jews living in the small village of Petrovichy, southwest of Moscow. Exact birth date unknown due to lack of official records. January 2nd is adopted as his birthday. Literary context, Fitzgerald, This Side of Paradise, Lewis, Main Street, Wharton, The Age of Innocence, Lawrence, Women in Love, Pound, Hugh Selwyn Moberly, E.R. Burroughs, Thuvia, Maid of Mars. Historical events, blank. Date, 1921. Author's life, blank. Literary context, Dos Passos. Three soldiers, Zamyatin, We, Svetaeva, Milepost, Akhmatova, Anno Domini. MCMXXI. Historical events, Kronstadt Rebellion, New Economic Policy, NEP in Russia. Irish Free State is established. Opposition to New Dominion status sparks Civil War, 1922-3. Quota laws restrict immigration to U.S. 1922. Nearly dies at the age of 2, the only child survivor of an epidemic of pneumonia in Petrovichy. Isaac's sister Manya born June 17th. She later changes her name to Marcia. His uncle Joseph in the United States offers to help the family to emigrate. Joyce, Ulysses. Fitzgerald, The Beautiful and the Damned. Lewis, Babbitt. Eliot, The Wasteland. E.R. Burroughs, Men of Mars. Bailey, Petersburg. Pasternak, My Sister, Life. Mandelstam, Tristia. Mussolini marches on Rome. Fascist government formed in Italy. End of Civil War in Russia. Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, USSR, is declared. Stalin, General Secretary of Communist Party. Revival of Ku Klux Klan in U.S. 1923. Leaves Russia on January 11th, never to return. Reaches Ellis Island with his family on February 3rd and arrives in New York 4 days later. His first home in the U.S. is an apartment on Van Siclen Avenue in Brooklyn. Adjusts to the new language and culture quickly while his parents struggle. His father works in factories and warehouses. E.R. Burroughs, Pirates of Venus. Gorky, My Universities. Bobble, Red Cavalry, to 1925. Odessa Tales, to 1924. Coolidge, U.S. President after Harding's death. Hyperinflation in Germany. Munich Putsch by Nazis fails. 1924. Blank. Trotsky, Literature and Revolution. Ford, Parade's End. Forster, A Passage to India. Death of Lenin. Joseph Stalin succeeds him. Ramsay MacDonald forms first short-lived labor government in Britain. Photographs first transmitted across the Atlantic. Gershwin, Rhapsody in Blue. 1925. Attends PS 182 kindergarten, where teachers quickly recognize his talents and move him up a grade. Moves with his family to a better apartment on Miller Avenue. His father opens a convenience store on 751 Stutter Avenue, where Isaac spends most of his spare time working. Learns math, bookkeeping, and economics while helping his father. Begins reading many pulp books and magazines sold in the shop, in secret, as his father disapproves of them. Develops a thirst for science fiction. Kafka, The Trial. Fitzgerald, The Great Gatsby. Hemingway, In Our Time. Dreiser, An American Tragedy. Dos Passos, Manhattan Transfer. Wolfe, Mrs. Dalloway. Scopes Monkey Trial in Tennessee. Al Capone, a major force in Chicago. Locarno Conference. Hitler publishes Mein Kampf. 1926. Blank. Kafka, The Castle. Hemingway, The Sun Also Rises. O'Neill, The Great God Brown. Anderson, Tar, A Midwest Childhood. The first issue of the magazine Amazing Stories is published. Germany admitted to League of Nations. General strike in Britain. Television demonstrated by J.L. Baird. First liquid fuel rocket launched by R. Goddard. 1927. Blank. Wolfe, To the Lighthouse. Wilder, The Bridge of San Luis Rey. Menberg Flies the Atlantic. First Talkie, the jazz singer. Chiang Kai-shek, leader of the Kuomintang. KMT, the Chinese Nationalist Party, unleashes an anti-communist purge. Beginning of the Chinese Civil War to 1949. 1928. His father moves the family business to Essex Street, a better area of Brooklyn. Isaac's responsibilities at the store increase while his mother is pregnant. War, Decline and Fall. Lawrence, Lady Chatterley's lover. Hoover elected U.S. President. Stalin announces first 5-year plan to transform industry and agriculture in USSR. Fleming discovers penicillin. First Mickey Mouse film. 1929. Younger brother Stanley is born in July, a few months before the Wall Street crash. The family have to work 16 hours a day, but their business flourishes. Hemingway, A Farewell to Arms. Faulkner, The Sound and the Fury. Hammett, Red Harvest. Wolfe, Look Homeward, Angel. Collapse of New York Stock Exchange. Worldwide economic depression follows. 1930. Attends East New York Junior High School 149. Stapleton, Last and First Men. Faulkner, As I Lay Dying. Hammett, The Maltese Falcon. First issue of magazine Astounding is published, a great rival for Amazing Stories. U.S. tariff raised. Empire State Building. Gandhi begins civil disobedience campaign in India. Nazis win seats from moderates in German elections. 1931. Blank. Hammett, The Glass Key. Blank. 1932. Graduates from junior high in the summer, starts at the Boys High School of Brooklyn, the best school in the area, aged 12. Most of his classmates enter aged 15. Huxley, Brave New World. Faulkner, Light in August. Roosevelt elected U.S. President in landslide victory. Nazis become largest party in German Reichstag. Oswald Mosley founds British Union of Fascists. Unemployed marchers clash with police in London. 1933. The Asimovs move again to a larger store in Ridgewood, a wealthier area of Brooklyn. They buy their first radio and listen to the events running up to World War II. Hemingway, Winner Take Nothing. N. West, Miss Lonely Hearts. Wells, The Shape of Things to Come. Roosevelt's New Deal strategies revealed. Prohibition repealed. Russia establishes diplomatic relations with U.S. Hitler becomes Chancellor of Germany. National Socialist Party declared only legal party. Japan withdraws from League of Nations. 1934. Joins a creative writing course at school. His piece, Little Brothers, appears in the school magazine. Fitzgerald, Tender as the Night. Waugh, A Handful of Dust. H. Miller, Tropic of Cancer. Kane, The Postman Always Rings Twice. Hammett, The Thin Man. Night of the Long Knives in Germany. Stalin's Great Purge of the Communist Party begins. Unrest in Spain. Mao Zedong's Long March across China. 1935. Acquires his first typewriter, a second-hand Underwood No. 5, and is accepted into Seth Low College as a medical student. Steinbeck, Tortilla Flat. Lewis, It Can't Happen Here. Wolfe, Of Time and the River. National Labor Relations Act gives workers in U.S. the right to join unions. Seventh and final Congress of Comintern officially endorses Popular Front against fascism. German government's Nuremberg laws, legitimizing persecution of Jews. Italy invades Abyssinia. League of Nations applies economic sanctions. 1936. Blank. Huxley, Eyeless in Gaza. Faulkner, Absalom, Absalom. Kuttner, The Graveyard Rats. E.R. Burroughs, Swords of Mars. German troops enter Rhineland. Spanish Civil War to 1939. Rome-Berlin Axis allies Hitler with Mussolini. Anti-Comintern Pact agreed by Germany and Japan. Italy joins later. Abdication of Edward VIII in UK. 1937, starts writing his first serious fictional piece, Cosmic Corkscrew, on May 29th. Works as an assistant in the college psychology department. Steinbeck, Of Mice and Men, Stapleton, Star Maker, Hemingway, To Have and Have Not, Tolkien, The Hobbit, Basque village of Guernica destroyed by German bomber planes. Chamberlain becomes prime minister in Britain. Sino-Japanese War to 1945. First jet engine and nylon stockings. Hindenburg disaster. 1938. Blank. Green, Brighton Rock, Dos Passos, USA. Germany annexes Austria. Munich crisis, manifesto of fascist, racialist ideology adopted by Mussolini's government. 1939. Marooned Off Vesta, Asimov's first published story, appears in the January issue of Amazing magazine. After 9 rejections, John W. Campbell also accepts the story Ad Astra on January 31st, and it is published in Astounding magazine, earning Asimov $69. Ring Around the Sun is published in a smaller magazine, Science Fiction, in February. Asimov continues to publish the story almost every month. Enters Columbia Graduate School in September as a probationary student, joins numerous SF clubs such as the Futurians, and becomes close friends with other SF writers including Fred Pohl, Sam Moskowitz, and Sprague de Camp. Joyce, Finnegan's Wake, Steinbeck, The Grapes of Wrath, H. Miller, Tropic of Capricorn, Chandler, The Big Sleep. First commercial transatlantic flights, Nazi-Soviet Pact, Hitler invades Poland, outbreak of World War II. 1940. Robbie, his first robot story, published in Super Science Stories. Green, The Power and the Glory. Hemingway, For Whom the Bell Tolls. Stead, The Man Who Loved Children. Chandler, Farewell, My Lovely. Kessler, Darkness at Noon. Penicillin developed. Churchill becomes Prime Minister. British Expeditionary Force evacuated from Dunkirk. Battle of Britain. The Blitz. Italy joins the war as ally of Germany. 1941. Nightfall published an April edition of Astounding. Disqualified from Army call-up because of short-sightedness. Fitzgerald, The Last Tycoon. Bradbury, The Pendulum. Germans invade USSR. Britain and the Soviet Union invade Iran. Japanese attack Pearl Harbor. U.S. enters war. 1942. Achieves a master's degree and applies for a Ph.D. at Columbia, but decides to defer his studies until after the war. Takes a job as a chemist at the Philadelphia Navy Yard. Marries Gertrude Blugerman. First introduces his 3 Laws of Robotics in the story Runaround, published in Astounding in March. The Encyclopedists, the first installment of the Foundation trilogy, is published in the May issue under the title Foundation. Sells the story Bridle and Saddle, entitled The Mayors in the Foundation trilogy, to Astounding for $400. Camus, The Stranger. Eliot, 4 quartets. Chandler, The High Window. Bradbury, The Candle. Russian troops halt German advance at Stalingrad. North Africa Campaign. Battle of El Alamein. 1943. Blank. Sartre. Being and Nothingness. Chandler, The Lady in the Lake. Bradbury, The Wind. The Crowd. King of the Gray Spaces. Germans retreat in Russia, Africa, and Italy. Allies invade Italy. 1944. The Big and the Little and the Wedge, entitled The Merchant Princes and the Traders, in the Foundation trilogy, published. Borges, Ficciones. Williams, The Glass Menagerie. Brackett, Shadow over Mars. Normandy Landings. Liberation of Paris. 1945. Dead Hand, The General in the Foundation trilogy, published in Astounding in April. Receives another call-up and enlists in the Army in November, where he scores a record 160 in the AGCT intelligence test. He reads his story, The Mule, published in Astounding in December, in Camp Lee at Thanksgiving. Orwell, Animal Farm. Wall, Brideshead Revisited. Bradbury, The Lake. Leinster, First Contact. Death of Roosevelt. Truman becomes U.S. President. Unconditional Surrender of Germany. Hitler commits suicide. U.S. drops atomic bombs over Hiroshima and Nagasaki. End of World War II. Wave of strikes in America to 1946. Attlee forms Labour government in UK. United Nations founded. 1946. Posted to Hawaii in March to help the Army conduct atomic tests. However, receives his discharge before tests begin and returns to New York after 7 months military service. Moves to Dean Street, Brooklyn with Gertrude and returns to his research at Columbia in September. Stead, Letty Fox, Her Luck. Goodis, Dark Passage. Bradbury, The Million-Year Picnic. First Martian Chronicles story. Nuremberg Trials. USSR extends influence in Eastern Europe. Iron Curtain speech by Churchill. Beginning of Cold War. 1947. Blank. Camus, The Plague. Levy, If This Is a Man. Williams, A Streetcar Named Desire. Bradbury, Dark Carnival. The Marshall Plan to aid post-war Europe rejected by USSR as threat to communism. Common Form, Communist Information Bureau, is created in USSR. Indian Independence Act. 1948. Receives PhD from Columbia in May. Starts work as a postdoctoral research assistant to Professor Elderfield. Publishes only a few stories as he concentrates on his first novel, Now You See It. Search by the Mule. Published in Astounding in January. Green, The Heart of the Matter. Mailer, The Naked and the Dead. Assassination of Gandhi in India. Jewish State of Israel comes into existence. National Party wins elections in South Africa. Policy of apartheid adopted. Russian blockade of West Berlin. 1949. Hands in his final Foundation story, and Now You Don't. Search by the Foundation to Astounding in March. Due to a cut in his research grant, Professor Elderfield terminates Asimov's employment in July. He takes a job as an assistant professor at Boston University. He and Gertrude moved to Boston, where they lived for 21 years. Orwell, 1984. De Beauvoir, The Second Sex. Miller, Death of a Salesman. Brackett, Sea Kings of Mars. North Atlantic Treaty signed. Communists win Chinese Civil War. 1950. Pebble in the Sky, his first novel, published by Doubleday to favorable reviews and sells well. I, Robot, published by Gnome Press. Highsmith, Strangers on a Train. E. Smith, First Lensman. Bradbury, The Martian Chronicles. Senator McCarthy launches unsubstantiated campaign against communist infiltration of U.S. federal government. To 1954. African National Congress, ANC, led by Nelson Mandela, institutes campaign of civil disobedience in response to apartheid. Korean War to 1953. 1951. Son David Asimov is born. The Asimovs moved to a larger apartment on Lowell Street in Waltham. The Stars Like Dust and Foundation published. Salinger, The Catcher in the Rye. Styron, Lie Down in Darkness. Bradbury, The Illustrated Man. Blank. 1952. Novels Foundation and Empire, David Starr, Space Ranger, and The Currents of Space, published along with a number of stories. Published as an academic book, Biochemistry and Human Metabolism in May with 2 university colleagues. Beckett, Waiting for Godot. Hemingway, The Old Man and the Sea. Wall, Sword of Honor, Trilogy to 1961. M. McCarthy, The Groves of Academe. A. Miller, The Crucible. Eisenhower elected U.S. President. Ascension of Elizabeth II in UK. First contraceptive pills. 1953. Second Foundation and Lucky Star and the Pirates of the Asteroids published. Meets Harlan Ellison at a SF convention, and the two become good friends. Baldwin, Go Tell It on the Mountain. Bellow, The Adventures of Augie March. Salinger, 9 stories. Bradbury, The Golden Apples of the Sun. Fahrenheit 451. Bester, The Demolished Man. Clark, Childhood's End. Death of Stalin. European Court of Human Rights set up in Strasbourg. End of Korean War. 1954. The novels The Caves of Steel and Lucky Star and the Oceans of Venus published, as well as more stories. Publishes his first non-fiction book for the public, The Chemicals of Life. K. Amos, Lucky Jim, Murdoch, Under the Net, Tolkien, The Lord of the Rings, Golding, Lord of the Flies. Communist Party outlawed in U.S. Vietnam War begins to 1975. 1955, Isaac and Gertrude's daughter, Robin Asimov, born in February, receives tenure at Boston University in the summer and is promoted to Associate Professor of Biochemistry. The End of Eternity and The Martian Way and Other Stories, published by Doubleday. Nabokov, Lolita, Baldwin, Notes of a Native Son, Williams, Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, Highsmith, The Talented Mr. Ripley, Bradbury, The October Country, Green, The Quiet American. Warsaw Pact formed. UN refuses to discontinue scrutiny of apartheid. South Africa withdraws from UN. 1956, buys his first house in West Newton. Writes his favorite story, The Last Question. Lucky Star and the Big Son of Mercury, published. O'Neill, Long Day's Journey into Night. Vester, The Stars, My Destination. Bradbury, The Circus of Dr. Lao and Other Improbable Stories. Clark, The City and the Stars. Khrushchev delivers secret speech at 20th Congress of Soviet Communist Party. Suez Crisis, Hungarian Uprising. Transatlantic telephone service linking U.S. and U.K. 1957. Novels The Naked Sun and Lucky Star and the Moons of Jupiter, published. Resigns from Boston University at the end of the academic year, retaining his tenure and title. Becomes a member of a small agency for public speakers. Makes his first appearance on TV. Navajo, Benin, Kerouac, On the Road, Cheever, The Wapshot Chronicle, Bradbury, Dandelion Wine, Dick, Eye in the Sky. Civil Rights Commission established in U.S. to safeguard voting rights. Macmillan becomes Prime Minister in UK. 1958. Starts writing a monthly column for Fantasy and Science Fiction magazine. Continues to write every month until 1991. Final Lucky Star book, Lucky Star and the Rings of Saturn, published. Takes a break from science fiction for 14 years to concentrate on writing non-fiction and becoming an accomplished public speaker. Pasternak, Dr. Zhivago, Capote, Breakfast at Tiffany's, Heinlein, Have Spacesuit, Will Travel. CND founded. Alaska becomes 49th state of USA. Constitution of the Fifth Republic adopted in France. 1959. Publishes two more non-fiction books, Realm of Numbers and The Clock We Live On. Bellow, Henderson the Rain King. Bradbury, A Medicine for Melancholy. W. Burroughs, Naked Lunch. Heinlein, Starship Troopers. Spark, Memento Mori. Revolution in Cuba. Fidel Castro becomes premier. 1960. Finishes the first draft of The Intelligent Man's Guide to Science on his 40th birthday. It is published in October with immediate success. The FBI opens a file on Asimov after he appears to support the view, in Inside the Atom, that the Russians were the first to have nuclear power plants. He is later targeted by the Communist Party. Unknown to him, his house is bugged and put under surveillance. Lee, To Kill a Mockingbird. Updike, Rabbit Angstrom, to 1981. Yates, Revolutionary Road. Spark, The Ballad of Peckham Rye. John F. Kennedy wins U.S. presidency. Sharpeville Massacre in South Africa. ANC outlawed. 1961. Blank. J. Heller, Catch-22. Salinger, Franny and Zooey. Heinlein, Stranger in a Strange Land. By Paul, A House for Mr. Biswas. Yuri Gagarin becomes first man in space. Bay of Pigs affair. Sierra Leone becomes independent. South Africa becomes an independent republic, leaving the Commonwealth. Erection of Berlin Wall. 1962. Writes The Kite That Won the Revolution, about Benjamin Franklin. Writes several more books on historical subjects during the 1960s. A collection of his column writing, Fact or Fancy, is published in book form. Bassani, The Garden of the Finzi Continis, Solzhenitsyn, One Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich. Lessing, The Golden Notebook. Albee. Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf? Yeats. 11 Kinds of Loneliness. Bradbury. Something Wicked This Way Comes. R is for Rocket. Burgess. A Clockwork Orange. Ballard. The Drowned World. Cuban Missile Crisis. Uganda becomes independent under Milton Obote. Sino-Indian border clashes. 1963. Now delivering 2 or 3 talks a month. Continues his column in fantasy and science fiction magazine and writes occasional short stories. Plath, The Bell Jar. Pension. V. Salinger. Raise High the Roof Beam. Carpenters and Seymour. An Introduction. Heinlein. Glory Road. U.S. Congress passes Equal Pay Act. Assassination of Kennedy. Johnson becomes president. Profumo affair in the U.K. Prime Minister Macmillan resigns. 1964 publishes The New Intelligent Man's Guide to Science and Asimov's Biographical Encyclopedia of Science and Technology, his longest book yet. A television adaptation of The Caves of Steel appears in Britain. Naipaul. An Area of Darkness. Bellow. Herzog. Cheever. The Wapshot Scandal. Bradbury. The Machineries of Joy. Ballard. The Terminal Beach. Nelson Mandela sentenced to life imprisonment for sabotage. U.S. Civil Rights Act signed by President Johnson. Nobel Peace Prize awarded to Martin Luther King. South Africa banned from Olympics over failure to renounce apartheid. Brezhnev becomes Communist Party General Secretary in USSR. 1965 begins writing the novelization of the Hollywood film Fantastic Voyage. Mailer, An American Dream. Herbert, Dune. Dish, The Genocides. Scott, Raj Quartet, to 1975. Death of Winston Churchill. Malcolm X assassinated. U.S. military intervention in Vietnam. President Johnson signs Voting Rights Act, outlawing discriminatory voting practices. 1966 wins a Hugo Prize for the Foundation Trilogy at the World Science Fiction Convention in September. Other nominations had included The Lord of the Rings by J.R. Tolkien, Fantastic Voyage published, Bulgakov, The Master and Margarita, to 1967, Capote, In Cold Blood, Pension, The Crying of Lot 49, Heinlein, The Moon is a Harsh Mistress, Keys, Flowers for Algernon, Le Guin, Rocannon's World, Bradbury, S is for Space. Mao launches Cultural Revolution in China. 1967, Blank, Marquez, 100 Years of Solitude, Styron, The Confessions of Nat Turner, R. Delaney, The Einstein Intersection, Clark, The 9 Billion Names of God. Six-Day War between Israel and Arab states, Biafran War in Nigeria, Argentinian-born guerrilla hero Che Guevara shot dead in Bolivia. 1968, Volume 1 of Asimov's Guide to the Bible published. Solzhenitsyn, Cancer Ward, Updike, Couples, Clark, 2001, A Space Odyssey, Dick, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? Le Guin, A Wizard of Earthseed, Dish, Camp Concentration. Student unrest in U.S. and throughout Europe. Martin Luther King assassinated. Violent reaction throughout U.S. Enoch Powell makes inflammatory speech in Birmingham, England, regarding immigration. Czechoslovakia invaded by Soviet troops seeking to reinstate communism. Richard Nixon elected U.S. president. 1969, death of his father. Volume 2 of Asimov's Guide to the Bible published. Reaches his goal of publishing 100 books in Opus 100. Oates, Them, Roth, Portnoy's Complaint, Vonnegut, Slaughterhouse-Five, Moorcock, The Cornelius Quartet, Bradbury, I Sing the Body Electric, Dick, Ubik. U.S. troops begin to withdraw from Vietnam. My Lai massacre made public. National moratorium, anti-war demonstrations across the U.S. Operation Menu, 14-month covert U.S. bombing of Cambodia. Neil Armstrong becomes first man on moon. 1970. Moves to New York City. Bellow, Mr. Sandler's Planet. Morrison, The Bluest Eye. Didion, Play It As It Lays. Spark, The Driver's Seat. Updike, Beck, A Book. Ballard, The Atrocity Exhibition. Black September Conflict in Jordan to 1971. Salvador Allende becomes world's first democratically elected Marxist head of state. 1971, John Campbell, editor of Astounding and Asimov's close friend, dies in July. Publishes the humorous parody The Sensuous Dirty Old Man. Updike, Rabbit Redux. Le Guin, The Tombs of Hattuan. Blank. 1972, the publication of The Gods Themselves marks Asimov's return to writing science fiction. DeLillo, End Zone. Le Guin, The Farthest Shore. Dish, 334. Bloody Sunday in Londonderry, Northern Ireland. Direct rule imposed by British government. Israeli building at Olympic Village near Munich attacked by Arab guerrillas. Strategic Arms Limitation Treaty, SALT I, signed by USSR and US. 1973, The Gods Themselves receives both the Hugo and Nebula Awards for Best Novel. Solzhenitsyn, The Gulag Archipelago to 1978. Pensioned, Gravity's Rainbow. Aldous, Frankenstein Unbound. Heinlein, Time Enough for Love. Energy crisis prompts state of emergency in Britain. First IRA bombing campaigns in London. Chilean President Salvador Allende and at least 2,700 others killed in coup led by General Pinochet. Legalization of abortion in U.S. 1974. In June, overcoming his fear of flying, he visits Britain, delivering a Mensa talk introduced by Arthur C. Clarke. Name appears in the Encyclopedia Britannica under both Asimov and science fiction. Publishes another humorous book, Lecherous Limericks. Roth, My Life as a Man. Haldeman, The Forever War. Le Guin, The Dispossessed. Resignation of Nixon following Watergate scandal. Ford becomes U.S. President. 1975, Steven Spielberg asks him to be technical advisor for his film Close Encounters of the Third Kind, but Asimov turns him down. The first issue of Isaac Asimov's science fiction magazine is published. Asimov contributes to each issue until 1991. Bellow, Humboldt's Gift. McEwen, First Love, Last Rites. Levy, The Periodic Table. Ballard, High Rise. Cordwainer Smith, Australia. Vietnam War ends. G6 Group founded, becomes G7 1976, G8 1997. 1976, The Bicentennial Man and Other Stories published. Carver, Will You Please Be Quiet, Please. Yeats, The Easter Parade. Bradbury, Long After Midnight. Soweto Uprising in South Africa. Death of Chairman Mao. Rhodesian government agrees to U.S. proposals for the introduction of black majority rule within 2 years. Jimmy Carter elected U.S. President. 1977. Asimov's health deteriorates and he suffers a heart attack in May, though waits to finish his busy schedule of talks before going to hospital for 3 weeks. Receives another Hugo Award and Nebula Best Novelette Award for The Bicentennial Man. Morrison, Song of Solomon. Hare, Dispatches. Pole, Gateway. King, The Shining. Bradbury, Where Robot Mice and Robot Men Run Round in Robot Towns. Ellison, Jeffty is 5. Blank. 1978. Blank. McEwen, In Between the Sheets. Green, The Human Factor. Monroe, Who Do You Think You Are? Murdoch, The Sea. Camp David Agreement between Carter, Egyptian President Sadat, and Israeli Prime Minister Begin. 1979. Publishes his Opus 200 and becomes one of the 10 most prolific writers in the history of literature. In Memory Yet Green, the first volume of his autobiography, is published. Invited to be a science consultant for Star Trek, the motion picture. Naipaul, A Bend in the River. Calvino, If on a Winter's Night, A Traveler. Didion, The White Album. Updike, The Coup. C. McCarthy Suttree, Styron, Sophie's Choice. Lessing, Canopus and Argus, Archives, to 1983. Adams, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Crowley, Engine Summer. Carter and Brezhnev, USSR, signed SALT II Arms Limitation Treaty. Saddam Hussein assumes presidency in Iraq. Soviet forces invade Afghanistan, to 1989. Margaret Thatcher becomes first female prime minister in Britain. 1980. Begins attending the Institute of Man and Science in Rensselaerville, which he will do annually until 1991. Second autobiographical volume, In Joy Still Felt, published. Echo, The Name of the Rose. Kutsi, Waiting for the Barbarians. Gene Wolfe, The Book of the New Sun. New parliaments of independent Zimbabwe elected, with Robert Mugabe as prime minister. Mariel boat lift. Mass exodus of Cuban refugees to U.S. Olympic Games in Moscow boycotted by over 45 nations over Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. Shipyard worker Lech Wałęsa leads strikes in Gdansk, Poland. Iran-Iraq War, to 1988. Ronald Reagan elected U.S. president. 1981. Buys his first word processor, a Radio Shack TRS-80, in June. Rushdie, Midnight's Children. Updike, Rabbit is Rich. Roth, Zuckerman Unbound. Carver, What We Talk About When We Talk About Love. Bradbury, The Haunted Computer and the Android Ape. Attempted assassination on Reagan. First case of AIDS detected in USA. President Sadat, killed by Islamic fundamentalists in Egypt. 1982. In October, Asimov returns to writing the Foundation series and publishes Foundation's Edge, which immediately enters the New York Times bestseller list, where it stays for 25 weeks. It is his first bestseller. His close friend Martin Greenberg publishes an anthology of Asimov's work entitled The Complete Robot. Allende, The House of the Spirits. Levy, If Not Now, When? Walker, The Color Purple. Keneally, Schindler's Ark. Updike, Beck is Back. Monroe, The Moons of Jupiter. King, The Dark Tower, The Gunslinger. Crowley, Little, Big. Falklands War, U.S. Equal Rights Amendment, guaranteeing legislative equality for women, fails to ratify. 1983, third robot novel, The Robots of Dawn, published. Undergoes a triple bypass heart operation and is hospitalized for several months. Sales of Foundation's Edge reach over 1 million in the U.S., and it wins the Hugo Award for Best Novel. Greenberg publishes another Asimov anthology, The Winds of Change. Kutsi, Life and Times of Michael K. Bradbury, Dinosaur Tales. U.S. troops invade Grenada when its government is overthrown. 1984. Asimov made Humanist of the Year, publishes Opus 300. Kundera, The Unbearable Lightness of Being. Bruckner, Hotel du Lac. Updike, The Witches of Eastwick. Carver, Cathedral. Gibson, Necromancer. Bradbury, A Memory of Murder. Soviet-led boycott of Summer Olympics in Los Angeles, blaming commercialization and a lack of security. Famine in Ethiopia. Indira Gandhi assassinated in India. Reagan re-elected as U.S. president in landslide victory. 1985 marks his 65th birthday with a non-retirement party at his favorite Chinese restaurant, Shun Li, on 66th Street. Final robot novel, Robots and Empire, published. Another anthology, The Edge of Tomorrow, published by Greenberg. Atwood, The Handmaid's Tale, Marquez. Love in the Time of Cholera. Bradbury, Death is a Lonely Business. C. McCarthy, Blood Meridian. DeLillo, White Noise. Card, Ender's Game. Gorbachev becomes General Secretary in USSR. Period of reform begins. 1986. Foundation and Earth, published in October, and enters the New York Times bestseller list, remaining there for 15 weeks. Monroe, The Progress of Love. R. Ford, the sports writer. Card, Speaker for the Dead. Gorbachev-Reagan Summit. Nuclear explosion at Chernobyl. U.S. bombs Tripoli. State of emergency in South Africa. 1987. Fantastic Voyage to Destination Brain, published. Morrison, Beloved. Tom Wolfe, The Bonfire of the Vanities. Mugabe changes the constitution and becomes president of Zimbabwe. Reagan and Gorbachev sign INF Arms Control Treaty. 1988, Prelude to Foundation, published. Carrie, Oscar and Lucinda. Rushdie, The Satanic Verses. Tyler, Breathing Lessons. Gorbachev announces withdrawal of Soviet troops from Afghanistan. Benazir Bhutto, elected Prime Minister of Pakistan, becoming first woman leader of a Muslim country. Terrorist bomb destroys Pan Am flight over Lockerbie, Scotland. 1989. Blank. Atwood, Cat's Eye. Radio Iran announces Ayatollah Khomeini's fatwa against Salman Rushdie. Banville, The Book of Evidence. Marquez, The General in His Labyrinth. DeLillo, Libra. Simmons, Hyperion. Bradbury, The Toynbee Convector. Crowley, Great Work of Time. Namibia granted independence from South Africa. George Bush inaugurated as U.S. President. First democratic elections in USSR. Collapse of communism in Eastern Europe. Tiananmen Square massacre in China. South African President P.W. Botha is replaced by F.W. de Klerk. Overseas end of apartheid. Fall of the Berlin Wall. 1990. Blank. Buy-It. Possession. Updike. Rabbit at Rest. Pension. Vineland. Bradbury. A Graveyard for Lunatics. Mandela released from prison. Pinochet stands down as president of Chile. Lithuania becomes first of the Soviet states to declare independence. Iraq invades Kuwait. United Nations Security Council condemns annexation. Thatcher resigns from leadership. John Major becomes British Prime Minister. 1991. Asimov's health declines. He is often in and out of hospital. Asimov laughs again, published. Oak Creek, The Famished Road. M. Amos, Times Arrow. Riots in Los Angeles. Clinton elected U.S. President. Gulf War. Yeltsin elected President of the Russian Republic in USSR. Bush and Gorbachev signed START Arms Reduction Treaty. Disintegration of the USSR. Bosnian War to 1995. 1992. Asimov is hospitalized and on April 6th dies. C. McCarthy, The Border Trilogy to 1998. Ondaatje, The English Patient. Smiley, 1,000 Acres. Oates, Black Water. Stanley Robinson, Mars Trilogy to 1996. Blank. 1993. Forward the Foundation, Asimov's last novel, published posthumously. P.D. James, Children of Men. Cordwainer Smith, The Rediscovery of Man. Gene Wolfe, The Book of the Long Sun to 1996. Roth, Operation Shylock. Palestinian leader Arafat and Israeli Prime Minister Rabin signed peace agreement in U.S. Maastricht Treaty, creating European Union, ratified. 1997. Gregory Benford commissioned to continue a new series set in Asimov's Foundation universe entitled Foundation Sphere. Blank. Blank. 1998. Greg Bear commissioned to write Foundation and Chaos. Blank. Blank. 1999. David Brenn's Foundation's Triumph, published. Film adaptation Bicentennial Man appears in cinema starring Robin Williams. Blank. Blank. 2002. It's Been a Good Life, a selection of Asimov's diaries, letters, and autobiographical writing is published. Blank. Blank. 2004. The film adaptation of I, Robot opens in cinemas, directed by Alex Proyas and starring Will Smith. It is an international success. Blank. Blank.